Hello. In this video, we're going to learn how to conduct an interview to help us with our research. Consider that an interview is a form of research. Good research is really about asking the right questions, not necessarily confirming or having the right answers. As with any research, you should aim to get more information than you need. You'll find that I recommend when you're doing hard research to get 3 to 5 more sources than necessary so that you can make good decisions. With an interview, if you have more information than you can use in your paper, you've probably done a pretty good job. Also, remember that while opinions and values are certainly very important, your job in an essay is not necessarily to confirm your own opinion or your own values. Oftentimes, you're really just trying to find information. You will also find that it works best to see an interview as a process within your writing process. So let's look at the types of people you might interview, or the types of interviewees you might have. I'll start with the one that you're least likely to use in a paper at college, and that is the person on the street interview. Somebody you choose at random, or several people you choose at random to ask 1 or 2 questions. Somebody who's willing to share an opinion here and there. That isn't usually something you can use in an academic paper because all you're gathering is an opinion on usually one question or one topic. When you do hard research, oftentimes you are trying to find the information gathered by subject matter experts. These are people who have specific experiences or have spent a great many years studying a particular and oftentimes precise field, and because of that they have knowledge about that field or about the topic that the average person doesn't really have. For example, if you were writing a paper on a particular immigration law or a proposed law, you could talk to a professor who happens to teach a subject that connects to immigration law, or you could talk to someone who is in the midst of writing laws, or who is a lawyer that works with people who are affected by that particular law. If you look carefully at the parameters of the essay you are writing now, you should come to the conclusion that you are going to be interviewing a person of experience. That is, a person who has gone through a particular kind of an event that fits the goals of the assignment we have, but their circumstances might be unlike the ones you've had. They've gone through something that has caused them to be stronger or more knowledgeable, or they just have an experience in something that you have not experienced. For instance, again, if you were writing an essay about an immigration law, a person of experience is somebody who is directly affected by that law. As the goal of your essay is to argue for a particular quality necessary or helpful in overcoming challenges, your interviewee will be somebody who has gone through a particular challenge, and much of the interview will include you talking about that particular event or the challenge that they endured or got through. Oftentimes, journalists will interview a crime victim or a person who is a witness to a crime. That's a person of experience. They might talk about workers at a specific job and learn about what that job is like to do. It's important to know what kind of interviewees you are going to have for any sort of interview. Some people think that when you do an interview, you just show up with a notepad and a pen and or a recorder and just start asking questions off the top of one's head. However, that's not a good way to conduct an interview because you will not get the information that you necessarily need. Therefore, you need to prepare even before you show up. You need to set an appointment that is convenient for the person you're going to talk to, and try to make it a place that they're comfortable talking, where they feel free, not distracted, that sort of thing. You want that person to feel as open as possible. It's a good idea to inform them of the parameters of what you're trying to do. Tell them why you're asking questions. Determine if it's okay to record. Tell them the topics you plan to go over. This helps them subconsciously to deal with their event or talk about or think about their event in their heads, so that they're not stumbling and bumbling around when they try to have a conversation with you about it. Before you have an interview, you have to prepare if you want to do a good job. You should learn at least a little bit about your subject matter if you can, or the interviewee if it's somebody who has specialized knowledge, because that will help you to avoid wasting any time, but it will also help you to develop really good questions. Where most interviews seem to go poorly is in developing the questions. You want to write those questions down. Avoid questions that are about opinions, unless that opinion can be developed clearly and precisely, and if that opinion is vital to the purpose of your essay. You are not writing about this person's opinion. You're going to derive something and create your own opinion based on the information that person gives you. So you don't really need a lot of opinion questions. You want to ask very few yes-no questions. Develop very open-ended questions which allow the interviewee to share her or his experiences or knowledge. I think in most cases you are better off with 4 or 5 questions that allow a person to tell their story than you are 20 questions that just go yes or no. Even if you write your questions down, plan to ask follow-up questions. Plan to ask the person for examples to illustrate the points that they have made or the ideas that they have suggested. Before you do the interview, take the time to revise your questions so that they are not wordy or repetitive. Revise them so that the order that they come in is a natural, logical order to help that person do their best thinking. How you comport yourself during an interview can make a very big difference between whether you get a little bit of information or a lot of information, or whether you understand the information that you are provided with. Even if you're going to record the interview, take some good notes. Make sure you're writing a few things down. Try to avoid getting sidetracked. You're going to probably, at least in this assignment, talk to somebody who is a friend or a family member, and it's easy to go, oh yeah, that reminds me of such and such, and next thing you know, it's 3 hours later and you've only covered 1 or 2 of the questions. Don't be afraid to ask follow-up questions. If you don't understand an answer or something that that person has told you, it's better to ask them now. Risk feeling like you're not, looking like you're not that smart. It's more important that you get the information clear to you before you move on. Make sure your body language tells the person that you are paying attention. Sit up straight, look at people, don't just wander away, check your phone, all that stuff. All those things are little bits of body language that subtly tell someone you're talking to that you're not very interested in what they have to say. And if that happens, they are very likely to shut down or fail to give you as developed, clearer responses as you need. If it's appropriate, ask about other sources of information or other people that you can talk to. For example, if you are interviewing a professor about something that the professor is knowledgeable in, chances are real good that that person has done some reading on the subject, so they could lead you to some good websites or some good books or articles that would also provide you useful information. Ask if it's okay to follow up with them and how the person prefers to do that. Sometimes everything is clear during the interview, just like everything is clear during a class lecture, but then later you go home and you look over your notes and there's something that you need to get more clarity on, or you need some more information about. So oftentimes people are very amenable to having an email conversation, that you're willing to email them a follow-up question. And always say thank you and mean it. This person's giving you of their time and their energy. They may be talking to you about something that's deeply personal or important to them. And so it is really important to show what might seem like common manners, but it's easy to forget. I get that most of my students have more than one class, and many of them work. So sometimes you're doing an interview and you have to go directly to your job, or go to the next class, or go to another activity that's really important. And that's great. But the problem is sometimes you forget much of what you have done while that's clear in your head. So I think it's important, as soon as you can after an interview, to sit down and write something down, even if it's to take your notes and put them in order, or to make them more legible, or to put them in a paragraph form like you might if you were writing a little article. Take some time to listen to your interview and make more notes if necessary. See where you might have missed something that someone said. It's important, I believe, to write a thank you note or a thank you email to somebody who's taken that time for you. Again, write up some follow-up questions. Don't be afraid to ask those. If the interviewee has made some suggestions, as I mentioned before, about, say, a website or a book or something like that, take the time to look that up before you forget, and while the information that the interviewee has given you is fresh in your mind. There are several ways that you can incorporate the information you use from your interview into the essay that you are going to write. Your paper will not just be regurgitating every single detail of the interview, nor will it just be general observations about your interview. So you are going to use it in various ways. One way is to take a portion of the interview and perhaps a summary of the most important points, and put those in paragraphs, or a large paragraph where you also insert other material as you go along. Another way is to put quotes into each individual paragraph, each of which would probably cover a supporting point wherever that particular quote or piece of information is necessary. Of course, it's also very important to be clear. It's one of the most difficult things about writing, is to making clear to a reader what is already clear for you. So it's important to make clear who says what when you are referring to what people think and what people say. You need to use proper and appropriate names when you refer to the person that you've spoken to, unless it's a friend, and you can just say John told me such and such. You need to refer to them by their titles or their names. Let your reader know how that interviewee is connected to the subject matter that you have, whether it's a subject matter expert or a person who's had experience. So you can say, this person struggled with weight issues, or this person once was an addict, or something like that, if that's the appropriate subject matter and you're getting information based upon that person's experience. One thing that helps make things very clear is to put anything quoted directly into quotation marks. I've got an example here on the slide. She stated, quote, most students respond to barrier tests in one of 5 ways, close quote. Those quote marks tell us that that person said it, not you. Make sure that you do not reinterpret what you heard. That is, that you hear one thing and then you say it another way so that you can perhaps sound more literary or academic, but not actually saying what that person has actually said. If an opinion is expressed, try to make sure you are very clear about distinguishing your own opinion from the person who's you have spoken with. It's certainly okay to express opinions, but it's important that if you're not clear about those, even if you share that person's opinion, make sure you have made clear whose opinion is whose. Please look carefully at the examples of how one incorporates material from an interview. Again, when you have something quoted directly, you have to put that information in direct quotes. In most cases, quoting directly is going to be preferred. So, for example, you have Ms. Crombie said, comma, you introduce all quotes with a comma, then open the quote mark, Robert Parker rushes his books, and so the prose is sloppy, period, close quote. Notice how that is punctuated. If you don't use the person's name in your sentence, you can put that in the parenthetical citation, something you're going to learn about in a later chapter, where the period would then come after the citation. It works pretty much the same way when you are paraphrasing. I don't recommend paraphrasing unless you are very good at it, because sometimes students make the mistake of assuming that you do not have to attribute your source if you are putting things into your own words. That is a myth, and you want to make sure that you are still making those attributions. In-text citations are addressed in Chapter 8 of your textbook, as well as the works cited page. So I want to encourage you to look at the examples in that particular chapter. You'll see that you need 3 things when you put the information on your works cited page about your interview. The first thing you'll have is the name of the person you interviewed, last name, comma, first name, then a period, then the type of interview. You'll look at the examples. I have one that's a personal interview. That's something that's face-to-face, an interview over the telephone, or an email interview. There's lots of other ways to interview people, of course. After that, you have a period, and then you have the date that the interview took place, with the day coming before the month and then the year. And it, of course, ends with a period. You'll notice that we use hanging indents. Again, this is something that will get covered in a later chapter. I hope you will see as you go along the connection between asking someone questions to get information and where you're going to ask questions of a text, articles and books and websites, when you do other research in the future. Keep in mind that, as with any kind of writing, the purpose you have, your audience, and your rhetorical context, things you should have learned from your previous course, Those things are driving the choices that you make, from what questions you're going to ask, to what information you need to use, to what material you're going to omit from your paper. It's also important to know that fairness and honesty build your credibility. You may see yourself as a fair and honest person, but if you present information in a way that looks unfair or looks dishonest, it means that you lose credibility even if you are a very fair and honest person. And that hurts the overall quality of your argument. Of course, you can modify the process here as you see fit or as it best works for each time you have to do an interview or write an essay. And of course, some are going to say that seems like an awful lot of work for a single paper. However, you'll find that the process itself matters. Putting that extra time and energy into it usually will yield you much better results. Thank you and happy writing.